All right, strap yourselves in, because today we're going deep, like way deep, into the world of Zeno of Elea.
Zeno of Elea.
A pre-Socratic Greek philosopher who basically just messed with everybody's heads about, like, reality.
Yeah.
We've got a whole bunch of sources here, tons of stuff on paradoxes. Those, like, brain-twisting ideas that kind of contradict themselves, right?
Right.
So let's unpack this whole thing and see what Zeno was all about, why he's still, like, relevant thousands of years later.
Yeah, so Zeno, he was a master, like a real master at using logic, like straightforward logic, to arrive at conclusions that just felt wrong,
Yeah.
He really went after those, those core concepts like plurality, space, motion, time.
The big stuff.
The big stuff, yeah. And buckle up, because we're gonna see how these ideas, particularly his paradoxes, still have ripples in philosophy, math, physics.
Okay, so before we get to all that, like, mind-bending stuff, can you, like, set the stage for us? Who was the Zeno guy?
Okay, so picture ancient Greece, like 5th century BC. Zeno was hanging out in Elea, a Greek colony in, it's actually Italy now.
Oh, what?
And he was a devoted student of Parmenides.
Parmenides, yeah.
And Parmenides was this philosopher, right? And he believed that reality was this one unchanging thing.
Okay.
And so Zeno took that and kind of ran with it, defending this idea of the unity of reality with these incredible arguments.
With paradoxes.
With paradoxes, exactly. And it left everybody scratching their heads for centuries, like literally centuries.
So if Parmenides was all about this oneness of everything, what was Zeno's, like, specific thing? What was he trying to do?
Zeno was like the ultimate defender of monism.
Monism.
It's like, imagine a giant tapestry, right? And every single thread is connected, creating like one unified piece of art.
Okay.
That's kind of how Zeno saw reality. Completely indivisible. And he was on a mission to prove it, He went head to head with anyone who, like, even hinted that maybe things were a little different.
I'm sensing, like, some serious philosophical drama here.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely drama. He didn't hold back at all.
Right.
He went after the popular belief, right? The idea that the world was full of separate objects.
Plurality?
Plurality, exactly. And he was like, nope. And he used logic to kind of take that down.
Okay.
So he argued, right, that if something truly exists, you should be able to divide it.
Okay, yeah.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But then he took it further and said, you could theoretically just keep dividing that thing forever.
Infinitely smaller and
Infinitely smaller. And here's where it gets kind of trippy.
Okay.
He argued that if you can infinitely divide an object, right, all those tiny, tiny parts, they'd have to be infinitely small.
Yeah.
Basically, they'd have zero size.
Okay.
And if they all have zero size, how can they possibly add up to something that actually takes up space?
Okay, yeah, now I'm starting to feel my brain hurt a little bit. Yeah. So he's saying that the very idea of, like, separate divisible objects leads to this, like, absurd conclusion.
Exactly. He used logic, to kind of demonstrate that this idea of plurality just doesn't make sense when you think about it really, really hard.
Okay.
And he even argued that, like, there has to be an infinite number of things between any two things.
Okay.
Otherwise, they would just be like one thing, blurring the lines between them.
Right, yeah.
So, he really went after the idea of separation and distinct objects.
Okay, I need to catch my breath for a second.
Yeah.
I already feel like I'm falling down this, like, philosophical rabbit hole here.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't even gotten to, like, the really famous stuff, like Zeno's paradoxes of motion.
Oh.
I've heard about these, and they sound like impossible.
Yeah, so Zeno's paradoxes of motion, right?
Yeah.
They're his most famous work, and for good reason.
Yeah.
Because they all seem to show that motion, something we, like, experience every single day,
All the time?
All the time is actually impossible.
Wait, impossible. How can something that we do all the time be impossible?
Right.
Yeah.
That's the brilliance of Zeno,
Yeah.
He takes this everyday thing, right, like movement, and he turns it into this mind-boggling puzzle.
Yeah.
And he does it with such like compelling logic. It's really hard to just dismiss it.
Okay.
So let's start with one of the big ones, the dichotomy paradox.
Okay.
So imagine you're walking across a room.
Simple enough.
Simple, right.
Yeah.
But to get to the other side, you first have to walk halfway there, right?
Right.
Okay, but before you can even get halfway, you have to walk half of that distance.
Uh-huh.
And before that, half of that distance, and so on and so on.
Right.
Zeno argues, right, that because you can always keep dividing that distance in half, you'd have to complete, like, an infinite number of these tiny, tiny movements
Yeah.
to get anywhere.
Okay.
Which means logically, you could never actually start walking.
Okay, my head is officially spinning.
So he's saying that every single movement we make can be broken down into an infinite number of like teeny tiny steps.
Yeah.
So we can never actually reach our destination.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Okay.
He's highlighting this, this potential absurdity, this potential problem
Yeah.
in how we think about space and time being, infinitely divisible.
Okay.
It really makes you question, like, how do we even move at all?
I'm guessing the dichotomy paradox was just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, there's more.
There's more.
There's more. Remember the classic story of Achilles and the tortoise?
I think so, but yeah, refresh my memory.
Okay, so Zeno uses that story to create another paradox.
Okay.
So imagine, right, the swift-footed Achilles racing a tortoise.
Okay.
But he gives the tortoise a head start.
Okay.
Zeno's argument is that Achilles, he could never catch up.
Huh.
Because every time he reaches the point where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved a little bit further ahead.
Right. Even if it's just a tiny bit. Yeah, the tortoise is always slightly ahead.
Exactly. So Achilles is stuck in this endless loop.
Oh, wow.
Of almost catching up, but never quite getting there.
Wow.
It's like motion is an illusion.
I think I need to go lie down after this. My brain needs a break. These paradoxes are like messing with my perception of reality.
I know, it's a lot to take in, but don't worry, you're not alone, right?
Okay.
These paradoxes have been boggling minds for centuries.
Yeah.
And what's even crazier is that they still have relevance today, influencing thinkers in all sorts of fields.
Really? How so?
Well, for starters, right, they introduced this concept of dialectic to philosophy, which is, using reason and logic to debate and explore ideas.
Okay, so like having a structured argument with a friend.
Exactly.
Where you both learn something.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So even if his conclusions seemed out there, the way he got there was actually revolutionary.
So he was ahead of his time in a way.
Yeah, he was way ahead of his time.
Wow.
And get this, his ideas about infinitesimals, those infinitely small quantities, they actually foreshadowed like way later developments in math, like calculus.
Wow, so Zeno was like a time traveler or something.
Right.
Yeah.
But tell me, how did people try to resolve these paradoxes? Because we obviously do move and things do exist as separate entities.
Right.
So how did they make sense of this?
Yeah.
Well, some philosophers like Aristotle, he tackled Zeno's paradoxes by distinguishing between actual infinity and potential infinity.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the difference?
Okay, so think of it like this. Actual infinity means like infinity all at once.
Okay.
Like an infinite number of points on a line.
Okay.
Existing right now, like all at the same time.
Okay.
But potential infinity means that something can become infinitely large or small over time.
Over time.
So it's like a process. So Aristotle was saying Zeno's paradoxes only become a problem if you believe infinity exists all at once right now.
Right now, yeah.
He argued that motion and plurality, they don't require us to finish an infinite number of tasks in a limited time.
Right.
They just involve the potential for infinity.
Okay.
A process that could theoretically go on forever.
Yeah.
But doesn't have to.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But what about modern science? Has physics or math come up with their own explanation for Zeno's paradoxes?
Oh yeah, modern science has some pretty interesting perspectives on these age-old puzzles.
Okay.
Take, for instance, atomic theory.
Okay.
It directly challenges Zeno's argument against plurality.
How so?
Well, remember how Zeno said that if something exists, it must be infinitely divisible?
Right.
But atomic theory, it tells us that matter is made up of these tiny indivisible particles called atoms.
Atoms, yeah.
So there's a limit.
So no more infinite divisibility problem.
Exactly. And when it comes to the motion paradoxes, modern math has tools like calculus and limit theory to handle those infinitesimals without those logical contradictions.
So we can mathematically describe motion and change.
Yeah.
Even if it involves these infinitely small steps.
Exactly. And there's even a phenomenon in quantum mechanics.
Ooh, quantum mechanics.
Called the quantum Zeno effect.
Okay.
Which adds another layer of complexity to this whole thing.
Okay, the quantum Zeno effect. That sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Okay, so it's a little complex.
Okay.
But in simple terms, it suggests that observing a quantum system can actually slow down or even stop its evolution.
Wait, are you saying that just by looking at something, we can affect how it changes?
That's what this effect seems to suggest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and some people, they see this as a modern-day echo of Zeno's paradox of the flying arrow.
No way, really? How so?
Well, remember how Zeno argued that, at any given moment, the arrow is occupying a specific point in space, meaning it must be at rest?
Right.
The quantum Zeno effect suggests that by constantly observing a quantum system, you're essentially freezing it in a particular state, preventing it from changing.
Yo, that's wild.
It is wild.
It's like the act of observation is creating a Zeno-like standstill.
In the quantum world.
In the quantum world. Wow.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept, and it shows how, how Zeno's ideas, even though they're ancient, can still spark thought and debate in like the most cutting edge science.
That's incredible. So even though modern science has provided some like explanations for Zeno's paradoxes, it seems they still hold this like power over our imagination.
Absolutely. Zeno's paradoxes, they weren't just like clever brain teasers. They were a profound invitation, like a real invitation to question our assumptions about the world, about how we perceive it.
It makes you wonder, what other like simple ideas are hiding these deep mind-bending paradoxes.
Right, exactly. It's like there's always more to discover, more to question.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not always about finding the answers, right?
Right.
It's about asking the right questions,
right,
and exploring different perspectives. And Zeno's paradoxes certainly did that.
They made people think.
They made people think
about these big questions.
About space and time and motion and the nature of reality itself.
And those are still relevant today.
Absolutely. They're as relevant as ever, which is amazing to think about,
It is.
These ideas from thousands of years ago still spark such lively discussion.
Yeah.
It really shows the power of philosophy.
It really does. And it makes you wonder what other like philosophical mysteries are waiting to be uncovered,
Oh, absolutely. There are so many more out there.
Hidden in the depths of human thought.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm ready to keep exploring.
We do.
Let's do it.
It's fascinating how Zeno managed to like pack so much philosophical punch into these like really simple thought experiments.
Right.
His paradoxes weren't just about like motion or plurality. They were about like challenging, our entire framework for understanding reality.
It's like he was saying, hey, if the way we think about the world leads to these like contradictions, then maybe we need to rethink how we think about the world.
Exactly. And that's what makes his work so like timeless, Yeah. He was forcing people to like confront these really deep foundational questions that we're still struggling with today.
Okay, so we've talked about how others have tried to like resolve Zeno's paradoxes.
Right.
But what was his like end game? Was he actually trying to prove that motion and plurality were impossible? Or was there like something more to it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like we don't have any writings directly from Zeno. So we kind of have to like piece together his intentions,
From like secondhand accounts.
Yeah, from what other people wrote about him.
Yeah.
But if we look at his paradoxes, right, in the context of his teacher, Parmenides,
right,
and the whole like Eleatic school of thought, we start to see this bigger picture.
Okay, remind me about Parmenides' philosophy again.
Yeah.
We touched on it a little bit earlier.
Right. Parmenides was all about the one.
Okay.
He believed that reality is ultimately like this single, unchanging, eternal entity.
Right.
And everything we perceive as like change or motion or, even the existence of separate objects, he saw as like illusions, right?
Okay.
Products of our like limited senses and flawed thinking.
So it's kind of like a cosmic magic trick where things appear to be changing, but it's all just smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, like a very philosophical magic trick.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of scholars, they believe that Zeno's paradoxes were basically, defending that view.
So by showing that the common sense view of the world, the everyday view of the world leads to these like logical absurdities.
Yeah.
He was actually trying to make a case for the idea that everything is one and unchanging.
Exactly. He was basically saying, hey, if you think motion and plurality are real, you end up with these paradoxes.
Yeah.
So the only way to avoid these paradoxes
Right.
is to just accept that reality is fundamentally one and unchanging, just like Parmenides said.
It's like he was using the paradoxes to like back up his teacher.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
like, look, if you follow the logic of believing in multiple things and constant change, you end up at a dead end.
Exactly. He was using logic as a weapon. Right.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to deny our everyday experience, but to point towards like a deeper, more fundamental truth about reality.
So he wasn't necessarily saying that motion and plurality are literally impossible.
Right.
But rather that they don't really make sense if you accept this idea of the one, this ultimate unchanging reality.
Exactly. He was challenging people, to question their assumptions, to look beyond the surface of things, to consider a different way of understanding the world.
It's so fascinating. It really makes you appreciate the power of these philosophical arguments.
Yeah.
How they can make us see the world in a completely different light.
It really does. And what's remarkable is that this approach of using paradoxes, these seemingly absurd arguments to make people think, it hasn't gone out of style. It's a strategy that philosophers and thinkers have used,
for centuries. It's like planting a seed of doubt in people's minds.
Yeah.
To get them to question what they thought they knew, a little shakeup.
Yeah, like an intellectual shakeup.
Exactly.
And sometimes, a good shakeup is all we need to kind of break free from those old ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And to open ourselves up to new possibilities.
I love that idea. So even though we may not have definitive answers to Zeno's paradoxes, they continue to serve as valuable tools.
Absolutely.
For philosophical exploration.
They remind us that the pursuit of knowledge is a journey. It's not a destination.
Right.
And often, the most important part of that journey is asking the right questions, even if the answers remain elusive.
It's really striking how much we can learn from these ancient thinkers.
Yeah.
Thousands of years later.
Thousands of years later.
Makes you wonder what other philosophical gems are just waiting to be discovered in the annals of history.
It does make you wonder, and who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe by studying the ideas of philosophers like Zeno, we can gain new insights into the challenges, and opportunities that we face in our own time.
It's like having a conversation across the centuries,
Yeah.
Connecting with the minds that have shaped the way we think about the world.
Absolutely. And perhaps even finding inspiration to shape the world in new and unexpected ways.
Right.
But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. We still have more to uncover about Zeno and his paradoxes.
Right.
And I think it's time to delve into one of his most perplexing arguments,
Okay.
The one that really throws a wrench into our everyday understanding of motion. The paradox of the flying arrow.
Okay, lay it on me. I'm ready for another dose of philosophical mind bending.
Right.
What's the deal with this arrow?
All right, so picture this. An arrow, right, soaring through the air. Okay. We see it moving, right? It's going from point A to point B.
Yeah. Seems pretty straightforward.
Straightforward, right? But Zeno, master of mind games, right?
Yeah.
Decided to dissect this seemingly simple act of motion. He argued that at any given instant, if you freeze time, the arrow is occupying a space that's exactly equal to its own size.
Okay, so it's taking up a certain amount of space.
Exactly. It's taking up a specific amount of space.
At any given moment.
Yeah. But if it's fully occupying that space, he argued, then it can't be moving. It's at rest.
Wait, what? Just because it's taking up space? It can't be moving. How does that even make sense?
I know, right? It sounds crazy.
Yeah.
But think about it this way. If something is moving, it has to be changing its position over time, right?
Right.
But Zeno argued that if you freeze time at any single point, the arrow isn't changing its position, it's occupying that fixed space.
So he's basically saying that movement is like a series of snapshots, and our brain just stitches them together to create this illusion of motion.
That's a great way to put it. Zeno's argument hinges on this idea that if you break down motion into these infinitesimally small moments, there's no actual movement happening in any of those moments. It's just a series of static positions.
Okay, my brain is officially fried. This is why I stick to hosting.
It's a lot.
And leave the philosophy to the experts like you.
You're in good company, This paradox has been stumping people for centuries.
Right.
But here's the thing. Even though it seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Zeno's flying arrow paradox, It raises some really important questions
Okay.
about how we understand motion and time itself.
So it's not just a thought experiment designed to just, like, make us question everything.
Yeah.
There's a deeper point.
There's a deeper point here. It forces us to examine our assumptions about the world.
Yeah.
Assumptions that seem so obvious that we don't even realize we're making them. Like for example, the assumption that time flows smoothly and continuously.
I never really thought about it that way.
Right. Most of us don't, but Zeno's paradoxes, particularly this one, the flying arrow,
Yeah.
they invite us to consider, alternative ways of thinking about time. Like, what if instead of this like smooth, continuous flow,
Right.
time is actually made up of these like discrete, indivisible moments,
That's
like a
so
series of snapshots.
Like a flip book, like those old flip books.
Like a flip book, exactly.
Where you flip through and the images create the illusion of movement.
Exactly. And it highlights how Zeno's paradox challenges us to think outside the box, right?
Yeah.
To consider that maybe our everyday perception of reality is not the whole story.
It's like those optical illusions where your brain tricks you into seeing things that aren't there.
Right.
Maybe our perception of motion is an illusion too. Just a really, really convincing one.
It's a fascinating possibility, and it shows how Zeno, even all those years ago, was grappling with questions that are still relevant today. In modern physics and philosophy, questions about the nature of time, the continuity of reality, and really the limits of human perception.
It's incredible how these ancient paradoxes can still, spark such lively debate today. It's like they tapped into something so fundamental.
Yeah.
About being human, this desire to understand the world around us, even if it means confronting these like mind-boggling contradictions.
And I think that's the ultimate legacy of Zeno, of Elea. He left us with these intellectual puzzles that force us to question, to explore, to never stop seeking a deeper understanding of reality.
That's beautifully said. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Zeno and his paradoxes.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure unraveling these mind-bending ideas with you.
Likewise. And to our listeners, we hope this has inspired you to keep questioning, keep exploring, keep those philosophical gears turning.
Keep thinking.
Until next time, stay curious and remember, there's always more to discover beneath the surface of things.